Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to the CeFi versus DeFi, or whatever we want to call this panel. Just want to open, did anyone see the Economist magazine cover last week? It's down the DeFi rabbit hole. So DeFi is on the cover of The Economist, the oldest, most prestigious business magazine. That's where we are. I highly recommend reading it, and it'll cheer you up if you get sick of the FT. Sorry, it's just a personal bugbear of mine. FT's crypto coverage, no good. But anyways, I'd like to introduce our panel. Glenn, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Glenn Barber. I work for Copper. We are a global crypto custodian, and just want to say thank you very much to Mainnet and the organizers for having us here.
Hello, my name is Huang. I am CEO of OKCoin, a global crypto platform where you come and buy and sell and exchange and use your crypto. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. And Hong, where did you work before you started your crypto exchange?
I spent 8 years at Goldman on Manhattan, and then later spent 3 years doing investment, growth investment.
Yeah. And Glenn, what was your former job?
I have 30 years of capital markets experience at various brokers and investment banks, Lehman Brothers, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, and have been in crypto for 3 years with Voyager Digital, FalconX, and now Copper.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. The biography is interesting, of course, but it shows where we are. We've got like two long-time Wall Street vets who are now in crypto. And remember, this used to be news 5 years ago. Someone from Wall Street came to crypto, and now that's everyone's resume, which is neat. So, but let's go into the substance of it. So we've got, DeFi, obviously, the hottest topic in finance right now, but it's not like centralized finance has gone away. So, I've heard a couple of theories. One, they're just going to kind of keep growing on, DeFi is going to keep growing, CeFi is going to remain over here, never will they meet. And then some people are like, no, they have to meet, they will. Glenn, what do you think? Are they going to come together, or is it just going to kind of be two different worlds for the foreseeable future?
No, I think they definitely have to come together, excuse me. This is just normal market evolution. I think that DeFi offers numerous advantages. It's scalable, there are less fees, it's much more efficient, it's global, it's borderless, it's permissionless. But like anything else, right, you need liquidity. And so there are going to be times when, in order to scale and get past a certain inflection point of user adoption, you're going to need centralization of some sort just to bring buyers and sellers together, right? And I think that all the advantages that DeFi is going to bring to various industries around the world are going to have to harness some basic capital markets philosophy that says, let's just make it easier for transactions to happen. And so therefore, there will be an intersection that will benefit DeFi from the CeFi world and allow it to just continue to grow till it does not need that anymore.
What about you, Hong? Can you ever see OKCoin kind of touching the traditional, partnering with traditional banks, or, is there going to be alliances, or what's going to happen on that front?
I personally believe in the future where DeFi will eat the world. Probably not in the current format, probably in a different format, but I think ultimately the future is where the technology will give more tools to individuals, where individuals can participate directly and speak to each other directly and realize their own value on an individual basis. I think that's the trend of the technology in our human society over the long term. But within the foreseeable, call it 5 years to 10 years maybe, there will be a parallel world where, on the one hand, the traditional world will continue. It may be affected by what's going on in the crypto side. And then crypto and DeFi will continue to evolve as well with technology, with the community, with how we, as participants in the industry, make it more user-friendly, and at the same time try to maintain some of the benefits that it brings to the society, which is transparency, which is auditability, which is all the contract spirit being coded into on-chain algorithm, not being corrupted by any individuals or any third party. So I think that will be a long transition. That's where we, as a firm, we want to play a major role in that, either in helping the larger audience to see and embrace crypto, but at the same time also participate in the direction to move toward a long-term future where it's more individual based.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the ideal, or everyone here probably is familiar with DeFi and its potential, what it does. But let's talk about the old world for a bit too. As a reporter, you're kind of skeptical, and I've seen before, I used to cover tech, and it was actually right here in this hotel. I remember being at a conference where the CEO of a big cable company said Netflix was a fad and would go away. And you just, sort of would not acknowledge it. We all know what happened since then. So I'm kind of curious, take me inside the mentality of the big banks, because when you're faced with disruption, you can do one of two things. You can try buy it, bring it in, co-opt it, or you can try kill it through regulation and flexing your lobbying muscle. Glenn, sounds like you've got a lot of sort of friends or ties to the old banking world. So what are they saying? Take me inside sort of their mindset. What's their playbook going to be?
Look, I think every bank is different. Every traditional financial institution is approaching it from a different way, but they're getting it, right? I think the market is advanced enough and mature enough at this point that this is a real asset class, and that they realize that this is not something that's going to go away and is not some flash in the plan, right? So depending on who you are and what you're doing, you will see people sort of use it for operational purposes, right? So you'll see people that want to see T0 settlement in the equity market, right? So it took decades for the US market to go from T3 to T2 settlement, and now people like Paxos and other infrastructure providers are saying, look, through blockchain technology, we can go to T0 same-day settlement in the stock market, just like we can in crypto. You will find people that are issuing bonds on the blockchain, because why shouldn't we have the ability to basically use an internet browser, scrape a database, and find out exactly where those bonds were originated, who issued them, who bought them, who sold them, whether they traded at par, discount, or premium, and then basically do the research and tracking to see whether or not these are attractive value propositions. And then, even for people like us on the custodial side, we have very active engagements with household names where you can go into Times Square, see their banners, and are trying to figure out, do we have the capacity to hold digital assets on our balance sheet, either for ourselves or on behalf of clients? Or do we need something that says, I want an arm's length sort of ecosystem out here where our clients are delivering fiat, we're providing the financing in dollars or euros or some other base currency, and someone like Copper or anyone else is going to do everything else. You're going to custody, you're going to trade, you're going to clear and settle, and basically deliver performance. So, kind of a long-winded way of saying that every institution, based on the research they've done, the knowledge they've gleaned, is going to do something that is most appropriately suited to their business. But I would be hard-pressed to say that people have the luxury to ignore it anymore.
Yeah, we had an interesting discussion backstage about sort of Paxos, the need for T0 settlement. I realize that's not pure DeFi, but the technology is obviously better. But both of you brought up sort of an interesting phenomenon. The kind of like ethos and worldview of the systems are different, because there's still going to be humans out there on both sides, and those humans will make mistakes. When there's a bank error now, it might take a lawsuit or mistaken transfer, but you can sort of claw the money back. But with software, what's done is done. But is that a problem? I mean, can we go over there if there's no kind of like error reversal mechanism? So like, how do you look at that, Hong? Is the world ready to do that? And can we build in some safety rails for mistaken transfers? Because look what happened with Ethereum. We had to hard fork it to fix the DAO thing. That was when Ethereum was small, and that was one transaction. But if the entire financial system goes there, we can't like hard fork, the settlement mechanism every week. So how do we address that?
Yeah, I think it is, to your point, it is a change of ethos. It is a change of mental framework, because in the traditional world, we rely on the third-party intermediary to take care of things for us, right? But in crypto, where we do truly believe in everyone taking their own responsibility and taking care of own wealth, that individual responsibility and accountability is key. Everything happening on chain is having its finality. If I send some Bitcoin to my friend, even if it's a mistake, it happens. It's out there in the transaction, and that transaction can only be reversed by another transaction that my friend agreed to do separately. It cannot be. That transaction itself cannot be reversed on chain. So I think that in itself is something that's going to happen over time. It has to happen over time if we really truly move toward a fully decentralized world. At least the fundamental layer has to be centralized. I think the technology is there, the T0 settlement technology is there with the blockchain, and even in the current financial system, I think there is actually room for making that happen. Previously, in my previous life, we talk about the cross-border transaction being very costly and taking a lot of time. But when I was talking to the industry stakeholders there, their feedback is, the insider feedback is that a lot of the hurdle to making it more efficient and less time-consuming is not actually in technology, but more in the fact that there are different stakeholders and there are different jurisdictions and governments in between, and that type of trust building between different participants and also the transaction finality when there is possible error made during the process when third-party intermediaries are involved are just not. People just cannot handle it. That's why we end up with what we have today. So I do think that there is a technology part, but then there's also how people think about their individual accountability and deal with it.
What's your thoughts on that, Glenn?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think there has to be some kind of compromise and basically a safety valve. Just as an example, I was at a dinner last night where I literally think that everyone else in the room was smarter than I am. And this was basically a bunch of people that work on DAOs or decentralized autonomous organizations. And really what they were trying to figure out, because it was less a dinner than sort of a roundtable conversation where the mic was passed to various participants and people could ask questions and tell people what they were working on. And there was just a huge bunch of really, really smart people working on these questions, right? And it really was about governance. You basically have software and code running all of these blockchain applications and these decentralized apps, but you had very real people worrying about what that code could represent, because while it's extremely objective and truth-based and trust-based, right, to Hong's point, there are going to be clearly erroneous things that go on. In fact, I mean, that's why we had a hard fork of the Ethereum blockchain in the first place. So the system has to account for these sort of things. And one of the interesting questions was, a gentleman from a VC firm said, when you do and make these DAOs, these decentralized autonomous organizations, how much of it is just code and how much of it is human interaction, right? And there were varying degrees of it, but I think what was apparent at this during this conversation is that people really understood that humans played an extremely significant part in this going forward, and that DeFi at its core will still have to be managed by people that take into account the variables and the different possible outcomes, whether good or bad.
But where do we have those conversations? Because, I mean, it's so important and it's interesting. I mean, is this going to be deep in a Discord forum somewhere to, figure out how we're going to stand this up, or?
Well, that's a great question, right? And to, I think, sort of piggyback on the last conversation between, Dan and the mics, in my mind, this is where the US has to step up, right? This is where a lot of things that are sort of fantastic in people's minds are being developed right now that will become commonplace in the next 5 to 10 years when you have these decentralized autonomous organizations literally scaling and making various industries much more efficient on a global basis, right? So I think, or I hope that the US in particular doesn't want to lose that competitive advantage, will embrace these discussions and say, look, there's a lot of global planning for the new global economy happening right now. And it's literally, it's not even just in the private sector, it's literally happening at these conferences right here, at the sidebar conversations and dinners where people are getting together and saying, this is how I'm going to create technology to solve this problem. And to your point, it is in a Discord channel, it's in a Signal chat, it's in a Telegram chat, and it's in closed door group meetings with technologists, right? And I think the industry owes it to itself to sort of find a way to expand those conversations in a much more open-based forum, which they do during Reddit and other things. But I think that our country has to find a way to invest itself and then also bring that out into the open.
Interesting. You mentioned the US government. Unfortunately, it's been a pervasive topic during this conference. Because Hong, you set out the ideals of trustless, personal responsibility. The technology will, bring us into the future. But the U.S. government's still very much present, not just the banks. And you saw they're threatening Coinbase, which is sort of the most mainstream of them all. And then we've even seen CZ, the most kind of maverick cowboy out there. He's sort of walking back from it. It's like, we have no headquarters. No, we will be there. So I think that's a real risk. I mean, is that something you worry about, Hong? What are you going to do when they show up on your door? You can say, hey, DeFi is the future, but if you get subpoenaed, as someone did at this conference, or someone asks you to come in for deposition, or they're going to seize your property in San Francisco, those centralized forces still seem to have the upper hand.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we are in conversations with policymakers and regulators, and that's something that we'll continue to do. Secondly, I think that having that conversation and quote unquote your subpoena is something that we are watching very closely. I think it will be happening. It's part of the industry when you have technology like this that is really bringing in transformative forces into the space and potentially disrupting everything, not only just financial sector, but anything else, including regulation, how we think about regulation, how we can actually, because regulation is there to help us protect those who are uninformed. How can we actually help using that code, right, to do that instead of regulation and law enforcement? I think that's something that people are trying to do with the DAO and some of the other initiatives. To your point of previously, how we can actually encourage those discussions, and I think that's closely tied to our conversation around regulation and how the whole industry will evolve, because ultimately it is about encouraging entrepreneurship. It's about encouraging innovation. And there are going to be a lot of gray areas, as we have seen, for example, in the last 20 years, both in China and in US and globally, where innovation and entrepreneurship has been successful in certain areas. We see that those have been successful because regulators are taking a step back and let people innovate when things are not clear. And that has to happen. And I think we are seeing push and pull in the industry. I'm personally very positive. I think there are things. These are kind of natural things that's happening, but the industry is showing good momentum of sharing what we believe in. The communities is making our voice heard, and I think that's important. And I think also in U.S. there are federal level regulations, and there are also state and municipality level policymakers, and that's where a lot more grassroots voice can be heard more clearly. And community is the core of crypto. The grassroots community movement is the core of crypto. So we need to actually continue to push on that front.
Yeah, again, ideally that's how it works out. The regulator conversations, continue, they get more into it, the communities get better at engaging with the government. But I confess, I think things might get worse before they get better. I just see conflict out there. Glenn, be honest, I mean, how's this going to play out the next couple of years?
This is anybody's guess. I'll just give you a perfect example, right? So there's some people I know at this conference that are putting out a decentralized version of trading equities, right? And so how is this going to work, right? Are they going to have, the wherewithal to have an onshore presence? Probably not to start, right? They're going to be offshore. And so one, how do you market make? How do you provide liquidity? How do you allow shares of Tesla, Facebook, Apple, and whatever other equities that they're going to put on the platform to trade efficiently like crypto in a 24/7 global environment, right? So that's number one. How do you put this thing together? How do you get investors and participants to really want to trade on this thing? But more importantly, to your point, right? What is the US government going to say about it? What do they have to say about it, right? This is a complete jurisdictional new area, right? That if no one touches a US dollar, for example, do they even have jurisdiction, right? What can they do to an offshore software platform that's providing liquidity ostensibly in US equities that could be even off limits to US investors, operates around the world everywhere except the US, and how do they go about saying, am I going to shut down their servers? Am I going to shut down their investor base? And can I even do it in the first place? So I think there's an increasingly complex equation and a whole bunch of questions to say, do countries have to band together and group together in terms of a regulatory framework that makes sense from a top-down general perspective to account for situations like this that, outside of their nation state, they may want to regulate, but they literally have no ability to.
Okay, we're almost out of time. I'd just like to wrap with asking both you just take like 15 seconds or so to say what you think is like the most interesting trend in DeFi for the coming year that you're watching.
You want to go first?
We have been looking at the space, and I think for DeFi and NFT, for example, I think there's a lot of discussion around NFT. I was asked the other day about DeFi, how much financial engineering is happening on DeFi, how that is different from what we are seeing in the traditional financial world. But the thing is, I think the important part is how we are seeing the more use cases being developed on top of crypto. First, we see the monetary layer that is decentralized, which is Bitcoin. And then we see a new financial system that is decentralized, which is DeFi, that we're seeing starting from last summer. But then I think this summer we're starting to see some of those use cases, starting with NFT, starting with metaverse. We're seeing that virtual-only place where people can actually start to build a digital world, creating a digital currency within that digital world and starting to attach value to it. And I think there will be more use cases coming out of it. And the other thing is there are a lot of
Sorry, I'm going to cut you off there, but new use cases, NFTs, metaverse, interesting. Glenn, single thing you find the most interesting thing to watch in DeFi in the coming year?
In one word, the gamification of everything, right? The ability to get into an NFT universe or a metaverse and earn money, accrue value, and do so by either building something, playing something, or otherwise participating in a virtual world, right? The fact that people will earn livings doing this, the fact that people will accrue wealth doing this and transfer value doing this is just going to be incredible to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be such an interesting year. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thanks to Mainnet, Ryan Selkis, who I know is leading the fight against central governments. I don't know if he's leading, but it's a neat thing to watch. So thanks very much. Please give a hand for our panelists.